So when you think about UpperEdge's advisory practices, the first thing to think about is just IT software applications. So that would be on-premise, brick and mortar, or it could be cloud, right? Obviously there's an evolution here where a lot of things is moving to the cloud. Large IT vendors are trying to move and migrate, so we're following that as well. There's the IT services as well, which is a big component to this. You buy applications, you buy or subscribe to the software, you usually need, if not always need, some sort of implementation partner, whether it's the vendor themselves or another large IT firm to come in and implement. And we're there to help and cover those areas as well as also application support, application development, testing, and then infrastructure support as well. So in terms of the areas that I particularly focus on, right, the practice that I lead, it's Microsoft, Salesforce, and ServiceNow. We pick those very strategically, right? It's also driven by just pure organizations we work with asking us, hey, I need help. Microsoft is a big vendor of mine. What can you do? And this all goes back to working with organizations that have these large relationships. And what are the large relationships? Which vendors do they have their large relationships with? And typically it's Microsoft, right? And so we spent a lot of time building out our practice to ensure that these organizations can trust what they're going to be getting from us is going to instill in them the best deal at the end of the negotiation. In terms of Salesforce, there's a lot of organizations that already have Salesforce, right? So we're helping them with their renewal. But at the same time, there's organizations that are starting down this path, and so they want to make sure they do it right. Then ServiceNow is interesting. ServiceNow is growing. ServiceNow is getting a lot of adoption. They're spending a lot of time marketing themselves, and a lot of the organizations we work with are coming to us just like they did with Microsoft and they're doing with Salesforce, and they're saying, hey, ServiceNow is approaching us. I want to make sure I do this right. Or I signed up with ServiceNow 3 or 4 years ago. They felt different then than they are now. How do I get this right? What can you do to help? So the challenges that these organizations face with these vendors, the Microsoft, the Salesforce, and the ServiceNow, they're pretty much the same. It's quite simply, how do I know that what they're telling me is actually the best they can do? So is this discount that they're offering me really competitive or is it not? The other challenge is, how do I get this vendor, Microsoft and Salesforce specifically, who they've had a long-standing relationship with, how do I actually build leverage to affect change, right? It's great that I'm gonna push on them, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere. What can we actually do to improve our relationship, to improve our commercial construct with these vendors? And it's the same thing with ServiceNow that's a little more up and coming. ServiceNow, you need to make sure you know what's good or not good before you start the relationship with them, because once you sign, it's going to be very difficult, not impossible, to improve that relationship later. The challenge that these organizations face are they're daunting and they're tough. And so what UpperEdge can do is there's 2 layers. One, it's the tactical data, right? So am I getting a good price or am I getting a competitive price? That's easy for UpperEdge to answer because we have a database of intelligence that simply says, okay, based on the particulars of your situation, based on all the parameters, you should be getting X, but right now you're at Y. That's very simple. That's tactical. It's very important. But the other piece, the second layer, is the strategic side, right? So this challenge of how I improve my relationship, how do I get better pricing? How do I ensure that my contract is set up for success long term? Well, it's not just as easy to say, okay, thanks for the data, and then they go to the vendor, Microsoft, Salesforce, and ServiceNow, and put it on the table. It's how they package it. It's the story. It's the message. And we help empower these organizations with scripts, talking points, templates that have all been driven by best practices, not the industry, by the way. It's tied to what works best for Microsoft, what works best for Salesforce, and what works best for ServiceNow. Because there's common themes, but each has a very specific path that you need to take to be successful, and we bring that to the table to overcome that ultimate challenge, which is I want to execute the best deal I possibly can with these vendors. In terms of benefits, what our clients get at the end of the day, so to speak, it comes really in multiple forms. The first is obvious, right? Did we save them money? So this is a tricky one in the sense that a lot of organizations, they want to focus there, and I get why. The problem is that as the vendor specifically I cover, or my practice areas cover, as they evolve to the cloud, if all you're focused on is upfront savings, you're doing yourself and your organization a disservice. So sure, we saved you money upfront. It happens in every engagement that we take on. But really it's, did we do a good enough job setting you up for success longer term? And that's the other benefit. It's the commercial terms, it's the protections, it's all of the other elements that have nothing to do with the upfront price, although that's there. It's about the longer term. And so that's a tangible benefit that we have organizations that we've worked with that have come back to us and said, hey, I'm so glad I had that renewal term protection in place because it made my renewal so much easier and had a real strong standing with that vendor. The other area in terms of benefits, it's not hard savings, it's not even concrete protections. What it is, it's an improved relationship. So if you take a Microsoft, for instance, or even Salesforce, perhaps you've had a long-standing relationship there, and it's probably been very tactical, right? Most organizations we talk to tell us how tactical that relationship is, even though they're spending millions of dollars. We work through the scripting, through the empowerment, through the messaging, through the guidance on how to operate within certain vendors. We actually hear from our clients say, hey, you know what? I actually have a better relationship. It's no longer tactical, it's actually a partnership where we're no longer talking about contractual terms in pricing. We're talking about how can we work together to be innovative? How can we co-develop? How can we actually take it from stuff to a solution? If you're an organization and you're trying to figure out when would be a good time to use UpperEdge or any third-party firm like ours, the problem is you've probably already missed the optimal time. And what I mean by that is, based on experience, a lot of organizations don't really have the right process in place to think about their renewals, specifically with Microsoft, Salesforce, or even ServiceNow. So they've planned on 3 months, right? 3 months before the renewal date, they're gonna be able to run their process. And can you do it? Absolutely. Now you'll do it better when you have the guidance of like an UpperEdge, no question about that. But the problem is if you have just now thinking about it, 3 months in, you're doing yourself a disservice. You should have been thinking about it the anniversary date going into your last year, so 12 months ahead. Now, that doesn't mean you're gonna be actively negotiating, right? Bringing in an UpperEdge to help you negotiate your actual deal. But what it is it's starting to set yourself up properly for the time period for which you will be negotiating. Because all of those conversations that you and your organization are gonna start to have with Microsoft and Salesforce and ServiceNow, every single conversation is an opportunity to create leverage. So it's just common sense. If you have more time to do that, the more leverage you're gonna have. And here's the thing, with Microsoft and Salesforce, you already are at a low level of leverage going into it. You just are. Now, our benchmarks, our stagecraft, our guidance is going to increase your leverage, whether it's 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, but you want the ideal, right? The best time to engage a firm like us would be giving yourself that full year to really build the strategy, to really understand and assess your current relationship, and then to prepare yourself for the actual negotiation. You don't want to rush that because these types of deals with Microsoft and Salesforce and ServiceNow, these are not $10,000 or $20,000 deals. These are $1 million deals most likely, and you can't afford to get it wrong.